له يا سيد أنا رجعت على لبنان، أتمنى أنك ترجع كمان على لبنان.
قرار صادر من مجلس الجامعة تسمية حزب الله الإرهابي.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. The United Nations is working towards extending the international economic aid for Lebanon. The words of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in Lebanon. An apartment in Brussels' neighborhood of Sherbik is searched with boxes of evidence seized as part of a probe into Tuesday's suicide bomb attacks. The United Nations Syria Special Envoy says he is targeting a start date of April 9 for the next round of peace talks, which he expects to focus on a political transition. The United Nations is working towards extending the international economic aid for Lebanon, according to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is visiting the country. Ban made the statement at a press conference after meeting with the Speaker of Parliament of Lebanon, Nabih Berri, to discuss the political situation in Lebanon alongside the President of the World Bank Group, Jim Yong Kim, and the President of the Islamic Development Bank, Ahmed Mohammed Ali Al-Madani. Ban praised the generosity the Lebanese people and government have shown in helping Syrian refugees, saying that the UN is trying to push for stronger economic aid for Lebanon from the international community in order to eradicate poverty and strengthen security and stability in the country. World Bank President Kim said that programs to fund Lebanon's infrastructure sector have already been planned and that the World Bank Group is looking forward to cooperating with an effective Lebanese government. Linda Tamim has the exclusive.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My question is for Mr. Jim. So you just mentioned that $100 million were allocated for the education of Syrian refugees. I'd want to know, first of all, if other aid is going to come through anytime soon, and if for any other needs that are, I guess, really necessary for all of those refugees who, most of them, really live under the standard of normal living.
So, yes, as I said, we have $900 million that are ready to be dispersed, but there are things that have to happen before that money is dispersed, and it's in many areas: water, transport, education, health. And so we're working as quickly as we can, but what we're saying is, please Lebanon, please Lebanese government, please Lebanese people, the money is waiting, we are ready to move, but we need the government also to move on certain issues in order for us to be able to release these funds. Moreover, what Dr. Ali said, we hope to raise at least $5 billion. And when we talk about concessional loans, this is many multi-year long-term loans at 0% interest. This is what we're really talking about. And this is our way of saying, you have done so much for the world, we now need to come in and push forward in terms of the development of Lebanon. But again, we can't do it by just making pledges. We have to have a functioning, working relationship, and it's difficult when the Parliament's not meeting and there's no head of state. So I know that this is an old problem for everybody here, but for us, we're simply urging everyone. We can begin moving this money all the way out into the municipalities. We have, for the first time in history, the very strong support of our board in doing this, which is innovative and which is not what we usually do. We're ready to move. We just need Lebanon to move.
Marada movement leader Sulaiman Fanji is lashing out at his presidential opponent, MP Michel Aoun, warning the lawmaker against using the streets to guarantee his election as head of state. He was quoted saying, if the change and reform leader wants to change the rules of a democratic game, then all the taboos should fall and all options will be open. And I will personally head to the parliament and attend the election session. Fanji cautioned this in remarks published in a Jamhuriya newspaper. Aoun, who is backed by Hezbollah, some of its March 8 allies, and the Lebanese forces, warned in a speech last week against electing a new president who does not enjoy wide representation within the Christian community, in line with the national pact rules on power sharing between Muslims and Christians. Russia and the United States are agreeing at talks in Moscow to use their influence over the sides in the Syrian conflict to persuade to accelerate efforts towards a political solution. Speaking after a 4-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Moscow and Washington would try in the next few days to nudge Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad to make the right decision about committing fully to peace talks. Negotiations in Geneva between representatives of the Syrian government and opposition are bogged down, and Washington believes that Moscow, closely allied to Assad, can convince Damascus to make concessions. However, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who was appearing alongside Kerry at the news conference in the Kremlin, did not say in his remarks if Russia was prepared to apply any pressure specifically on Assad. The United Nations Syrian Special Envoy says he is targeting a start date of April 9th for the next round of peace talks, which he expects to focus on the thorny issue of a political transition. He said that none of the sides had refused a document he had drawn up with common guiding principles to underpin the talks. The Mistura also called on the Syrian people to believe in the process and trust the negotiators.
I'm expecting and hoping. Of course, I don't control everything, but that's my expectation, and we will certainly push in that direction, that the next round of talks will be not focusing on principles again. We have had enough of that, and there are I think many valid common points there. Able to overcome these 2 weeks without any walkouts, any drama, any delegitimization, and potentially a paper that has been not refused by either side on what could be an understanding of principles, which then means next time we take the principle aside and we look now on political process. What I would tell the Syrian people is you're right in having doubts. You have been waiting 5 years. You have been disappointed so many times, and you have been suffering so much more than anyone could ever dream to expect from any people. But please, look at facts. Look at what has been happening. Would you ever have dreamt, just 3, 4 months, 5 months ago, that countries like Russia and the US would sit and actually seriously spend a lot of serious talks about how to end this conflict? Would you ever dreamt to see in the same room Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar, Turkey, and everyone else who has an influence in this conflict to spend for 7, 8 hours to discuss how to end this conflict? Would you ever have dreamt that overnight, at 0 hour on the 27th, 1 month almost ago, suddenly there was possible to produce a cessation of hostilities? So give us trust and believe in it.
Coming up next, who tops the Fortune 50 Greatest Leaders list for 2016? Stay with us to find out. Welcome back. An apartment in the Brussels neighborhood of Schaerbeek is searched early this morning, and boxes of evidence have been seized as part of a probe into Tuesday's suicide bomb attacks that hit the Brussels airport and a metro train, killing at least 31 people and wounding some 270 in the worst such attack in Belgian history. Earlier, Belgian police arrested 6 people as part of their investigation into the Islamic State suicide bombings, while authorities in France say they thwarted a militant plot there that was at an advanced stage. The federal prosecutor's office in Belgium said that arrests came during police searches in Schaerbeek in the north and Jette in the west, as well as in the center of the Belgian capital. The attack in Brussels, which is home to the European Union and NATO, has heightened security concerns around the world and raised questions about European countries' response to the threat from Islamist extremists. The Obama administration is announcing the indictment of 7 Iranian hackers for a coordinated campaign of cyber attacks on dozens of U.S. banks and a New York dam from 2011 to 2013. The indictment, filed in a federal court in New York City, described the suspects who live in Iran as experienced computer hackers believed to have been working on behalf of the Iranian government. At least 46 major financial institutions and financial sector companies were affected by the hacking campaign, according to the indictment.
An indictment against 7 alleged experienced hackers employed by computer security companies working on behalf of the Iranian government, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. A federal grand jury in Manhattan found that these 7 individuals conspired together and with others to conduct a series of cyber attacks against civilian targets in the United States financial services industry that in total, or in all, in sum, cost the victims tens of millions of dollars. These attacks were relentless, they were systematic, and they were widespread. They threatened our economic well-being and our ability to compete fairly in the global marketplace, both of which are directly linked to our national security. And we believe that they were conducted with the sole purpose of undermining the targeted companies and damaging the online operation of America's free markets. In addition to the actions that we have detailed, one of the defendants is also charged with illegally obtaining access to the supervisory control and data acquisition system of the Bowman Dam in Rye, New York. At the time of this alleged intrusion, the dam was undergoing maintenance and actually had been disconnected from the system. But for that fact, that access would have given this defendant the ability to control water levels, to control flow rates, an outcome that clearly could have posed a clear and present danger to the public health and safety of Americans.
The feud between Republican presidential contender Donald Trump and Ted Cruz over their spouses is heating up, with Cruz calling the party frontrunner a sniveling coward for threatening his wife on Twitter. The U.S. Senator from Texas also sharpened his attacks on Trump's conservative credentials, linking the brash billionaire to disgraced New York politicians Eliot Spitzer and Anthony Weiner. Cruz continued bashing Trump for making Cruz's wife, Heidi, a target of social media barbs. Cruz's remarks were the latest burst of hostility between the two camps, which earlier this week erupted into full view when Trump accused Cruz of posting a nude photo of Melania Trump on Twitter. Cruz denied having anything to do with the image, which was part of an attack by an anti-Trump super PAC, Make America Awesome. Catholic devotees in the northern Philippines were nailed to wooden crosses in a reenactment of Jesus Christ's crucifixion on Good Friday. Hundreds of spectators witnessed the bloody rites on the outskirts of Cutud village, about 80 kilometers north of Manila, which originally started as a small stage play in the 1960s. Devotees were attached to wooden crosses by 2-inch nails soaked in alcohol hammered through their hands and feet, while ropes and fabric supported their weight as they were hoisted up during the ceremony. Penitents also recited short prayers under the sweltering heat before being brought down and taken to a clinic for treatment. This bloody rite has become a popular tourist event in recent years, despite its graphic nature. The Catholic Church has expressed disapproval of such actions, deeming them misinterpretations of faith, saying prayers and sincere repentance are enough to commemorate the observance of Lent. Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos leads Fortune magazine's 50 Greatest Leaders list for 2016, jumping from the 27th spot last year. On Fortune.com, the senior editor-at-large wrote that it isn't enough to be accomplished, brilliant, or admirable. They need to be recognized for inspiration, follows, and those who have shown staying power. No mere flashes in the pan, and thus none of the U.S. presidential aspirants make the list. Rounding out the top 10 after Bezos are German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Myanmar President-elect nominated Aung San Suu Kyi, Pope Francis, Apple CEO Tim Cook, singer John Legend, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Cristina Figueres, and U.S. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. Also, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The UN is working towards extending the international economic aid for Lebanon. The words of visiting UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. An apartment in the Brussels neighborhood of Schaerbeek is searched with boxes of evidence seized as part of a probe into Tuesday's suicide bomb attacks. And the UN Syrian Special Envoy says he is targeting a start date of April 9 for the next round of peace talks, which he expects to focus on a political transition in Syria. Those are your Friday headlines live on Future News from all of us here and me, Yumna Nalfal. Have a great weekend. Take care.
بقول له يا سيد أنا رجعت على لبنان، أتمنى إنك ترجع كمان على لبنان.
قرار صادر من مجلس الجامعة تسمية حزب الله الإرهابي.